All right. Good afternoon. We're waiting for folks to join. Thank you for coming today. We'll get started in about a minute. Particularly appreciate people giving time today when it's such a gorgeous summer day. We don't have too many of those left. All right, I'm watching the room fill up. All right, well, I'm going to get started, and I know that we'll have other people joining us as we go. So anyway, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Hallis. I'm with the Disconnect to Reconnect Coalition, which launched over a year ago to provide information and resources and support, basically to help all of us navigate an increasingly digital world thoughtfully and safely. We're interrupting your summer so you can hear from the New York State United Teachers about their game-changing resolution on screens, EdTech, and AI, and from representatives of increasingly active parent groups in our area who want to see some important changes in their children's educational environment. So with that, I turn it over to our host and moderator, Adam Rabinovich. Adam?
Thanks, Hallie, Kathy, and good afternoon, everyone. So again, appreciative of your time and joining us. And I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to make sure that you all have Melinda Person's full bio. I'll put it in the chat, but I just wanted to make sure before that I highlight a couple of key points from her biography. We also are fortunate to have Lonnie Threatte from NYSUT, New York State United Teachers, with us today. So I'll just highlight that Melinda is the president of New York State United Teachers, the union representing more than 700,000 people who work in or are retired from New York schools, colleges, and healthcare facilities. More than 700,000 people. So thank you, Melinda, for your leadership and service. Melinda and her wife, Kelly, are the proud parents of Tommy, Andrew, Jude, and Lindy, who remind her daily what this work is all about: building a fairer, more joyful future for every child and every educator in New York. So those are two pieces I wanted to highlight by voice, and I'm going to add into the chat a few other important pieces of Melinda's bio. But assuming that we do have Melinda on the line, and I'll just pause to make sure together with Lonnie that we do, we're going to turn it over to Melinda Person to hear a bit more about this important, critical resolution.
Hello, can you hear me?
We do. Thank you. Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Well, it is great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize that I am in a car on the thruway, and hopefully the internet will the internet gods will be in my favor today, so I won't cut out. But I'm excited to share with you some of the really important work that our board of directors has been doing on this topic of the role of educational technology in our schools. We passed a resolution that you mentioned just a few short months ago that has a number of components related to the use of EdTech in schools. But I would say even more timely is in the last month, we've been engaged in a fight to prevent the use of a humanoid robot in a school district in New York State. If you've somehow missed that news, there was a school district in Salamanca where they were very quick to, the school board was quick to purchase a $60,000 robot that would be used in classrooms as a teaching assistant, was what they called it. And this robot would simulate relationships with our students, which we took issue with on multiple levels, but we were able to push that back and get the state education department to intervene and say that this was not appropriate. But I will note that the state education department stopped it on the grounds of data privacy concerns, which in our estimation is more of a technicality. We're deeply concerned that this is the direction that many of these ed tech companies are going to be pursuing. And so we are, in addition to what I'm going to talk about in our resolution, we are going to be looking for some really comprehensive guardrails to be put into place in terms of how AI is used in our schools and with minors. So I'll give you a quick summary of our resolution. We started with calling for a limit on the use of one-to-one screens or devices for students in pre-K through second grade, with the exception of students who have documented needs such as translation or special ed services. And this includes online assessments. We are also calling for paper and pencil assessment testing options to be provided for all students. This is all of these pieces of our resolution are, I would say, a floor, a beginning, a minimum. We saw what was happening in Los Angeles and what is beginning to happen across the country. And minimally, we wanted to advance this position that for our youngest learners, they need the time out in the real world to learn foundational skills that these one-to-one devices are inhibiting their learning rather than actually supporting it. So that was the first piece. The second piece of our resolution talked about the use of AI, and specifically, we do not believe it's appropriate for our youngest learners. But one of the things that is very important to us is that yes, we want our students as they get older to have access to AI literacy and understanding what it is and how it's used, but that it should not be available to students without supervision, and that all use should be educator-led and designed to promote critical thinking and digital literacy. And none of the use of AI should replace human instruction or creativity or judgment. So that's another big piece of the resolution. We're working now to find out what would be the best way to actually put this into a regulation or a law, a requirement for school districts to follow. And then the third piece, I would say, is the use of so-called social companion chatbots. We believe very strongly that any simulation of human relationships is inappropriate for minors. And so we actually got a bill passed this year that bans certain behaviors of chatbots with minors. And we're actively working to encourage the governor to sign that bill. But this is something that we are deeply concerned about. There are companies out there that are selling to school districts apps that are intended to replace mental health services for our students. Seriously inappropriate. And we believe that we need legislation to stop the expansion of that as well. So that's a quick overview of the types of things that we are pushing. I think it's important that every decision that we make in a classroom not be about like, what can we get the latest and greatest tool or technology? We need to start from a place of, is this good for kids? Is this good for learning? Does it strengthen the human relationships in our schools, or does it weaken them? And, we started this with a push for phone-free schools. A little over 2 years ago, and we said we wanted to bring that human connection back. And what we have learned in the process is this goes way beyond just cell phones. It is really about putting technology in its place so it can be used as a tool, and that we return our schools to the type of human-centered spaces and the human connection that actually helps contribute to the thriving of our students. So I could go on and on about this topic, but I'll stop there, and just say I want to thank all of the folks out there that are doing this advocacy in their community. It helps. It has raised this issue to the top of the sort of policy list, and I do believe that we're going to have some success next year. But just based on the number of legislators who are calling me and asking about introducing bills, the goal for us is and I believe for parents, for community members, for all the people who care about kids, is we don't want classrooms run by AI. We don't want classrooms run by robots. We want to make sure our kids have the tools they need for the jobs of the future. But we believe that we have those tools in our classrooms and with the humans that the very capable humans that are there today. So with that, I will hand it back to the moderator. And again, thanks to all of you who are doing the work. You mentioned briefly that I'm a parent, and my wife is also on our school board. So we are deeply invested in our own children's education. And so I often look at these issues from the perspective of a parent. My kids are getting access to things at school that I do not allow access at home. And as a parent, I find that troubling, and I'm sure many of you do as well. The goal here is to make sure that we keep our kids safe, and the safest place that they spend time should be in our schools. And that's something that we have some say over. And I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Thank you so much. Safe travels across our state, and some warm regards in the chat, and emojis coming through, many of us down here in Westchester and the Hudson Valley. So thank you, and all the best for the rest of your afternoon. And we will have a chance later with Lonnie on the line, and some other great panelists who you'll hear from momentarily for some questions and answers before we break. We are committed to releasing everyone by 1 o'clock local time. So we'll have some time for Q&A later. But to segue from Melinda's remarks and reflections, and we're going to introduce you shortly to Emily Wells, Caroline Rivera, Jill Marie Anderson, and Brett Goldman. They'll tell you a little bit more about their local work and coalitions. Just a note of appreciation from all of us that we're very grateful to Melinda and Lonnie and to NYSUT for championing Bell to Bell, which is the policy that Melinda alluded to, that was implemented in this prior school year last year for further protecting New York State children via a newish resolution to limit screens, EdTech, and AI in our classrooms. A lot of that we just heard referenced by Melinda. And as parents, educators, and community leaders, we are also here to offer recommendations that build on the resolution while recognizing the central importance of the human educator, who Melinda highlighted a number of times, and to deliver additional essential benefits to our children. So in that framing, we'll bring up, if they're not already in the front of your screen, Emily, Caroline, Jill, and Brett to talk a little bit more about some of these recommendations. And again, they'll each introduce themselves, and I'm going to share the information that they'll be going through on my screen, so hopefully everyone will be able to see that clearly as they speak. So I'm going to turn it over first to Emily Wells from IRL New York.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Wells. I'm a co-founder of IRL New York, which started to encourage delaying smartphones and social media for children and then quickly expanded into addressing tech oversaturation generally. So the more parents we talked to, the more we were hearing about issues with iPads, issues with the Chromebooks at school, YouTube, and then also we realized how important it is to also just promote free play and socialization for the kids. Thank you so much, Melinda. This all sounds so good. It is such a relief to hear as a parent that you guys are championing this issue, and we are so appreciative of the Bell to Bell. I'll just share a quick anecdote. I was talking to a high school student recently who said that she is so grateful for Bell to Bell that in the past few months last year of not having like phones in the cafeteria, she'd made deeper social connections than she'd made in the prior few years. So in that vein, I'm really hoping we can also like work to get the screens out of recess, out of lunch. I know that there's already been like good progress there, but just to make sure that in every school district, we're giving kids this time in these periods to socialize and interact with each other and develop those interpersonal skills. And then I would also add free periods just because I think having like seen it firsthand with my middle schooler and other middle schoolers, it just becomes another time that it's just really easy to be distracted by everything that's on these computers rather than focusing on the work that they need to get done so that they have time after school for all of their various activities. And then to the extent that a free like the work is done in the free period, I would so much rather see kids interacting than continuing just on the screens looking up whatever it is they're looking up or playing whatever games they're playing. I know one of the ways to really make that happen would be to promote paper-based homework, book-based homework, rather than screen-based homework. And I think it goes beyond that too, in that when you take the time spent on screens at school and any like sort of gaming or whatever else might be happening at home, and then add in hours of homework on the screens, it just adds up to so much. And I don't allow video gaming during the week, but I still see a seventh grader like coming to me with like dead eyes after 3 hours doing like various study apps and various work on the computer that really would just be better done on paper anyway. It's been shocking to me to see how little he and his peers retain from even stuff that they learned a few months ago. And I keep telling him, if you write it out, it's going to implant into your brain, you'll retain it better. But when they're offered these gamified apps, it's just so hard to resist. And then this is a whole thing, so I'll just touch on it, but there's a lot of interest and talk about opting out of personal devices in various grades. And I think that's a lot to get into, so we can just touch on it for now. But thank you again for your work on all of this. We are very appreciative, and I'll pass it to Caroline.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Rivera. I'm a co-chair of the Westchester chapter of Schools Beyond Screens. And Melinda touched on it briefly, or someone has touched on it briefly already, that there's a lot of movement coming out of the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the largest public school district in the country. And the advocate group behind that is Schools Beyond Screens. So we're really lucky to have a chapter here in Westchester. We have access to a lot of great resources, and we're able to connect with advocates who are working on this across the country. Here in Westchester, we're building a coalition of parents, educators, and students to connect everyone across school districts and offer resources with the ultimate aim of helping members advocate at the school district level for common sense rules and regulations around EdTech, AI, and devices in schools. So I'll be discussing our recommendation, the coalition's recommendations with respect to EdTech apps and device usage, which we've already touched on a little bit. Our first, and if you could just scroll down, Adam, so that it's front. There we go. Perfect. So our first recommendation with this respect would be to discourage the use of EdTech applications and devices that have little or no independent empirical data or peer-reviewed studies that support their efficacy. And this is a big concern of mine personally and other parents that I've spoken to. As Melinda said at the outset, before we adopt any EdTech app or device, we should be asking, is this good for students? Is this good for learning? And the vast majority of EdTech companies, believe it or not, cannot answer this question. Most apps are entirely untested. School districts have adopted EdTech in the classroom at an enormous scale with no data to support that the applications actually work. In my experience, what I've seen is that school districts oftentimes contract with a vendor that recommends various applications for different educational purposes, but those vendors are not required to study the efficacy of those applications before they're recommended. And the vetting process that those EdTech applications go through before they're recommended to a school district is very, very unclear. And this is something that the EdTech companies who are selling these apps will readily admit. There was a report released this year by Instructure, which is an EdTech company that manufactures a lot of these apps, that creates a lot of these apps. And they confirmed that only 40% of the top EdTech applications met every student succeeds act tier of reasoned or evidence-based efficacy. And to just break that down a little bit, only 19% of the apps met level 4, which is their lowest tier, and that only requires some demonstrated rationale for use. 14% met level 3, which requires some correlational research. Only 5% met level 2, which requires a quote unquote quasi-experimental design, and just 2% met level 1, which is the highest tier, which requires backing by at least one randomized control study. So only 2% of all the top EdTech apps met the highest tier of testing, and 60% of apps could not even demonstrate a rationale for use, which is the lowest tier. And that's extremely concerning. We need to be demanding more from these EdTech companies before we become so reliant on them in the classroom, especially when considering the growing literature demonstrating how harmful screen time can be for children and adolescents and educational outcomes. The next recommendation, the next coalition recommendation, which I'll touch on briefly, is to provide strict limits on the use of one-to-one devices in grades K through 5. So we appreciate that the union's already recommending no one-to-one devices through 2nd grade in their resolution. And as Melinda said, this is a floor. But we believe that the science dictates that at a minimum, children through grade 5 should not have a one-to-one device. We've touched on this a little bit, but chronic iPad and interactive screen use by children and adolescents rewires their neural pathways. And one of those is they're constantly chasing dopamine hits, and it negatively impacts their ability to sustain their attention and to tolerate frustration and boredom. And I know there's a lot of educators on this call. Frustration and boredom is where the learning happens and is vital to a learning environment. And that those tendencies don't stop at 2nd grade. We also know that studies support that writing by hand is the best way for young learners to retain information. And we also know that toggling between several sources of media, as kids usually do when they're on a Chromebook or when they're on an iPad, adversely affects working memory, inhibition, and the capacity to switch between tasks. So with that, I will hand it off to who's up after me. Jill.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet so many of you. And thank you so much to NYSUT for your commitment to truly preserving public school and advocating for human-centered teaching environment, which is also best for students. So I'm Jill Anderson. I wear a lot of hats. I founded Mindful Tech Lessons to give practical strategies to teachers and parents on how to work on these things, both at home and at school. But most importantly, I'm a public school teacher of over 20 years, a proud NYSUT member since 2006, and a mom to a rising 1st and 4th grader. And these recommendations gave me a huge sigh of relief because it felt like we were finally going in a direction, because being a mom is what transformed me as a teacher, quite frankly. I also founded a grassroots organization in Croton where I live, where we have over 400 people now in this small town working on these issues. But I want to be clear, both at home and at school, because we'd like a cultural shift. So something else that we're hoping that we could discuss is having a limit for videos to clearly defined educational purposes, ensuring that the videos do not replace real books or direct instruction. Distance learning brought us video recordings of other people reading books. So there are all these platforms where it could be a teacher, an actor, an AI character reading to a class. And the magic of a classroom read aloud is when your teacher or any adult, maybe it's a mystery reader, comes into the classroom and reads, because kids will laugh and you pause when they laugh, or they will have a question and you answer it when they ask a question. You make connections to things that you've taught earlier that day or in a small group. You take their comments, you ask comprehension questions. So a read aloud when you're a teacher is not the same thing as maybe someone just holding a book and reading. And that is not going to work if it's on the screen. There's absolutely a place for educational videos in the classroom. I, of course, myself use them, but it should be intentionally, and it should be a communal learning experience where there's discussion before, during, and after. So that's one thing we're really hoping to add. Another thing is to urge school districts to allocate funds for paper books, library staff, in increased focus of teaching long-form reading skills and reading engagement. So the amount of money that districts spend on devices, cases, carts, chargers, repairs, the monitoring software, the EdTech platforms to create these one-to-one device opportunities is wild. That is money that could be better used for all these physical resources, manipulatives, staffing, salaries, small group and whole group materials. There's a superintendent in California, Brian Easter, who came out and said that to refurbish one Chromebook cart cost him $21,000. But a black and white printer lease, including toner, is about $15 a month, and a box of paper with 5,000 sheets is $39. So this actually is a cost-saving method in the long run. And also, I'm a teacher, and we love to get things for our classroom, but we truly cannot be expected to supply our classrooms with these necessary materials. We wouldn't ask people in other professions to do that. There are teachers across the country and state that don't have access to photocopiers or printers in their classroom and basic materials to do their jobs effectively, because it is easier sometimes to just give them a fully loaded device where they can do everything on that iPad or Chromebook. And a lot of college professors are saying that a lot of kids have not been reading any whole books in high school. So we need to find a way to bring that back. The last recommendation that I would like to add on is really clear parameters around AI. I want to be clear that safety is the utmost importance, and this technology is changing too rapidly to expect our teachers to keep up with what is happening and to understand how to use this safely. Quite frankly, there are even directors of technology and administrators that don't know these things. Teachers, as you know, are juggling a lot. So, for example, we don't really think there should be any embedded chatbots in any grade, because even if they're not intending to be a companion, they're still learning about that user and using their name and personal information and overly agreeable. And it's not mimicking real relationships. We also really want any provisions of AI should include limitations about it. There's a big difference between access and education. We want a ton of education on AI, how to analyze and verify information, the socioeconomic and environmental impacts of AI. There's a lot to teach. We're asking for no student-facing AI in grades K to 8. I'll be honest with you, I would prefer, honestly, through grade 12. I have a spouse who works with AI at a tech company, and he always says the tech is changing too rapidly, that anything you're teaching these kids now, other than education-wise, is basically a waste of instructional time, and that they no longer think of AI as a thought partner. They think of AI as a tool, and if you cannot do that work without the tool, you should not be using the tool. And we need kids to develop their foundational skills when they're in a classroom first. So thank you so much for your time. And I'll pass it on to Adam. Are we back at you? Or Brett,
Yes,
sorry.
and then we're going to turn it right back to Brett, and I'm going to share some of the comments that Brett will be reflecting on, and then he'll have some more to add after that. So Brett, please, if you're not already, come off mic.
Yep, I'm here. This is Brett Goldman from OK to Delay Armonk. I have four daughters in the Byram Hills School District. I started a chapter of a national organization called OK to Delay. In my town, we have over 150 families that have publicly avowed support for our causes, which is to educate and empower parents to delay smartphones and social media. My role is to wrap up the last couple of recommendations. Thank you again, Melinda and Lonnie, for your time. But we also did a survey, and I want to discuss that. We did a survey of uh, uh, the tech coalition that had put together this call, and I'll get to that after the recommendations. But in essence, to add on to the things that everybody else has said, we think of a couple of other things that districts can work on, mainly to institute independent screen time audits that will actually be available to parents, ensuring compliance with screen time guidelines and allowing parents transparency into what their kids are doing online. I really don't know what my daughters are doing online in school. I talk to them about it, but there's no actual hard evidence. I should be able to see what it is that they're doing on a daily basis, and because I do that with my own phone. I'm, being the lead of OK to Delay, I'm pretty conscious of how I use my phone, and I'd like to have that same ability with my children and what they're doing in school. Also, and this is a separate issue as to devices, but I think that as it pertains to software, I think that what we're recommending that the union also advocate is to encourage school districts to establish district-wide technology committees composed of administrators, teachers, and parents to vet selection of EdTech software. I think you'll find when I discuss the survey results that it's not very clear, and I think that's been touched on earlier, but it's not very clear on how the districts are selecting the software that they're using or who is using what. So, to get into the survey, we conducted the survey of the chapter leaders of these tech intentional community groups: Tarrytown Unplugged, Rivertowns Collective, IRL NY, and Scarsdale Distraction Free Schools, Westchester, Heads Up Rivertown, Croton Collective, OK to Delay Armonk, Pleasantville, Port Washington, and several chapters of Wait Until 8th. These leaders represented hundreds of families in each of 14 school districts: Croton, Dobbs Ferry, Irvington, Mamaroneck, New York, Orangetown, Pleasantville, Pocantico, Rye Neck, Scarsdale, Tarrytown, Yorktown, and Byram Hills. Here are the high-level results. On screen time, all districts have screens in the classroom starting in K or 1. All districts have one-to-one take-home Chromebooks starting on average second or third grade. One district that was latest was 6th grade for take-home. No districts offer opt-out for one-to-one Chromebooks, although some are talking about it, for either classroom or homework. 1 in 14 districts has a screen time limit, and that one's limits were recommended, not required, starting at 15 minutes a day in kindergarten and up to 45 minutes per day in 4th grade. 1 in 14 districts allows parents to see their child's internet activity, and that was because of FOIL was discussed, and so the school made a special consideration. 13 out of 14 districts allow YouTube in all grades. Only 1 prohibits under 4th grade. On software and EdTech, all districts have lists of software publicly available. Many have more than 200 apps. 2 in 14 districts offer software usage lists by grade, only 2. 2 in 14 districts provide parents with the opportunity to provide input on software and EdTech. And so that was one of my recommendations. Right now, only 2 are doing it. In general, the survey respondents said that the vetting process is very opaque and no one knew if the software had been vetted by third parties for educational effectiveness. On AI, only 50% of the districts have an AI policy. 1 district has a specific list of software tools that integrate AI, and 1 district has the ability to opt out of AI completely. And this is the subjective part. What parents are really worried about. And I think that it's been covered by all the other panelists, but mainly it's distractions, unfettered internet use, despite filters, replacement of the human touch, gamification of learning, too much YouTube screen time, both passive and active, and a lack of tactile learning. I think I'll turn it over to moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brett, and to all of our panelists for sharing. We will now have some time, and Lonnie, you're welcome to join us as well for a couple of questions that came through the chat while the recommendations that you heard were just being shared, and maybe some others, and we can bring up Caroline and Brett and everyone who shared, and Jill. And if I missed any, and thanks to my colleague Nora from Westchester Children's Association who's here, please let me know, and then we'll hit pause. And if there's additional questions that come in, now will be the time to do it. So thank you again to each and all of you. One question that came through, which I don't think we got clarity if we have, from Melissa is from one of the speakers, if we're able to provide the names of the vetted level 1 and 2 EdTech apps to the group. So if that wasn't addressed, maybe there's an answer.
So yeah, I think that was directed at the recommendations I spoke to. So just doing a quick search on my end, I think it is available for a purchaser of, so it would be available for someone on a school district or school administration who has access to this app product library. So the answer is I do not have the answer right now, but there is a way, I think, to figure out which apps have what ESSA validation. So we can certainly do some work on the back end, and maybe it's a good idea to come up with some sort of directory that speaks to the different ESSA validation and other studies underlying specific apps. Yeah, so we can certainly take that into consideration, and I'll see if I can find an answer on the ESSA validations for the level 1 and level 2 apps.
Terrific. And it was asked, and I'll just reiterate that we will be sharing out this recording and any other resources or materials that that come up with the full group and others who registered but weren't able to join us for a variety of reasons. So moving through, and some reflections from our Westchester County Commissioner, Michael Arthur, our Commissioner of the Department of Community Mental Health. So some reflections, and then Kathy at least gave her answer, but maybe others have some insights. Are there any public service and PSAs to get out and educate on what we're talking about today being a public health issue related to this? So if anyone is aware of any, please share. If not, we'll move on. Thank you for highlighting the need and opportunity for that. A question from Otilia. Currently, we're finding families with limited.
I don't know what I think.
Limited resources, using cell phones to help with before and after school non-adult presence and supervision, basically new latchkey generation while parents at work. So the question here is, how do we support, educate, inform families using technology as affordable daycare? If anyone has any thoughts or reflections.
I can speak to that a little, Adam. One of the things that I realized doing my work, trying to, because this all started with me wanting to help the families of my students. This is what really dove me into this work. People don't know about all the other alternative devices and things that exist because they don't have the budget that an iPhone or an Apple has. So there are actually a ton of different things that parents can do to stay connected with their kids. I am a big advocate of home phones. It's called VoIP nowadays, Voice over Internet Protocol. Everybody having a phone at home makes a big difference. I'll be honest, I've been able to leave my son home alone since he was 7 years old and felt safe because he could call with a home phone, and you work your way up. So there are devices that you can use that don't have the internet access and the app store, which make them more problematic. Because remember, a smartphone is actually a mini computer and not really a phone. There's the light phone, the True-Me, the Bark, the Gab phone. I mean, there's so many options out there, and I have some of those resources on my Mindful Tech site, but I can also give them to send out, because I agree that parents need a way to communicate and get in touch with their kids, but it doesn't have to be a smartphone.
Thank you. I'll just pause if there was any other reflections on that. We We'll have about 10 minutes or so, at least, for questions and some more coming through in the chat, and then wrap up. And one of the things we'll want to make sure that everyone knows about, and we'll ask Lonnie to put in a plug for the Unplugged conference coming up that NYSUT is handling for September 25th. So I'll make sure that we leave for that as well.
Let me actually drop. I have a flyer I can drop in the app or in the chat on the Unplugged conference. We're having a big conference. Oh, and it's already there. We are having a big conference. This will be on September 25th in Albany. We have Jared Cooney Horvath is presenting. We will have a number of panels, and this will be a discussion very similar to the one that we're having right now, to be able to talk about the impact of screens over the past 10 years, to be able to talk about, what human-centered education and classrooms should look like. There's a lot of voices that need to be heard in this. We will have, a lot of educators, superintendents, principals, we'll have parents, we'll have advocates, we'll have, the whole swath of people being able to come together and have these thoughts. This has been a very sophisticated and exciting conversation. I think, Caroline brought up some really interesting points that we should, a lot of our professors have brought up some really interesting points that should be a part of this policymaking discussion that we should be kind of going forward with. Invite everybody to come. It is free to come. Register on our website. You can register right through the link that was sent in. Please join us. Please keep speaking, and keep advocating. There's a lot of great points that are coming out here. I will also put in the our resolution so you can see the actual resolution that came in. What we have is the so as soon as I stop talking and start typing, I'll put that into the chat as well. But really welcome the sophisticated conversations. There's a lot of great points. Some of these suggestions that you guys have brought up in here, I think need to be a part of what we talk about going forward with policymakers, with our local legislators. So really happy to have this conversation.
Well, we appreciate that true partnership and collaboration. So thank you, Lonnie, and hopefully you can stick around for a bit more. I'll return to some of the questions from the larger group. Eric asked, have there been any conversations about the difference between using internet-based apps versus non-internet-based ones? Some context, their son comes home with assignments that include YouTube videos, which I know we touched a little bit on earlier. When those videos end, they autoplay other videos that are totally unrelated. And also internet-based sites often have ads and other things that distract and send students elsewhere. So many distractions, he says, are placed in front of the kids, and the homework is a huge challenge. So the question was about the difference between using internet-based apps versus non-internet-based apps. If anyone has insights.
I could speak a little bit to that as a teacher. You're absolutely right that there is a difference in that you don't necessarily have to worry about some of the things that can be on the internet. And in a perfect world, the school does have some sort of a monitoring system that gets the worst out. But that is hard when now that device gets to your home. But what I have found and learned is even if it's not internet-based, even if it's an app, and I did not know this till I was a mom. I will be very honest. I was very pro, tech, this is great, this will be wonderful. And it wasn't until I saw how it did not help my child in a learning way that I saw there was actually a difference between learning or educational apps, and that you really so now instead of my students, and they used to play games on their devices in my classroom during center time, now they play with each other and they get so much more out of that, other than also the academics, right? They get the eye contact, how to not be a sore winner or loser, how to be respectful, and this is really at the heart of making these kids really ready for the real world, because with AI, it actually just makes us need this more. So although there are learning apps, and I don't want to say that for every single child it's the same way, but the research is really showing you don't get the same bang for your buck as we thought. And I've lived that as a teacher and as a parent.
Thanks so much. I encourage anyone who can see the chat to just keep an eye out. There's some great resources being shared and conversation. I'm trying to highlight the questions here for our very experienced and passionate panelists to weigh in on. So if I miss any again, Nora, please let me know. Here's a complex issue that Lisa raises as a question. Throughout COVID, there was a big push to put Chromebooks and internet access in the hands of low-income families as part of educational equity. What types of efforts can be made to undo this mindset while still strengthening our efforts towards closing the education and equity gap?
I will just chime in to say that there are studies that actually show that a lot of these EdTech apps and the use of devices widens the inequity gap. There are studies to support that the high achievers who are already going to be successful in certain educational environments do just fine with these apps, and in some cases it enhances their learning. But with kids who struggle, who maybe have learning disabilities, these apps exacerbate issues that already exist. If you have a student who has trouble paying attention, who has trouble focusing, which, by the way, is perfectly appropriate for a young adolescent brain to have trouble focusing and have trouble paying attention, it can make those educational outcomes much worse. So I think maybe reframing equity in this context is an important first step, because actually there are studies and we have data showing that it makes the inequity gap between high achievers and low achievers much, much worse.
Thanks so much for the reflections. And again, I encourage people to check out the resources that are being shared in the conversation. I see 3 questions, and if I'm missing any, please let me know. Otherwise, we will take these 3 and then move to wrap. So I'll share a question from Tim, then Andrew, Dr. Andy Bell, and then Shannon. Tim asks or says first, schools have been engaged in conversations and research on the use of AI and EdTech. Have you, meaning we or anyone, compiled a list of articles and research-based studies to help schools study the impact of screens in their communities? And if so, can it be shared?
I'll chime in again. Schools Beyond Screens is a great resource for this. And we have compiled a lot of studies. We have compiled a lot of reports and data. So I'm happy to include that in whatever email we circulate after the call to folks.
Awesome. A wealth of knowledge. Thank you. In a fast-moving field. The second to last, penultimate, did I get it right? Question comes from Andrew Bell, Dr. Andy Bell, who I know and has been very involved in a lot of aspects of what we're talking about. And he highlights that the negative impacts of digital tech in education is the converse of the positive impact of play when it comes to brain development. And he's wondering if both trends reflect a lack of awareness of how the brain works and develops, and then poses a question for us. Do educators understand the connection between play deprivation and EdTech?
I'd love to take this question. It's such a great question. And I'm going to be honest, PD, professional development in schools and in districts varies greatly, right? Districts have different initiatives, goals, missions, and the PD will often reflect that. This is not common knowledge, quite frankly. Just like doctors don't get trained in nutrition, and we know there's a connection with that in the body, it's similar to that. Teachers are not always trained in all these other areas. There's a lot to know, and that's at no fault of the teacher. So there recently was Disconnect. Reconnect actually did put on an amazing conference about play, and my supervisor let me attend it, and I was able to turnkey that information. So that's spotty. It depends on the district, but I agree. If there was more general education about play, about the brain science, I think that would really change the landscape for everyone.
Well said, Jill. And yes, thanks for shouting out that conference. And I'll drop the link into who was the keynote speaker there. I believe it's called the Institute of Play. So a lot to learn there. Unless I'm missing any, and again, we'll have a few extra minutes after this. A question from Shannon. Any advice for how to approach superintendents and or other decision makers who are vocally pro-tech and pro-AI? They're meeting with one tomorrow with a few other parent advocates and are unsure about the best approach to take. He has been unmoved by the studies and data that they've already provided.
I can speak a little to this. It's hard. It's so hard. I empathize. You go in with kindness. You go in with respect. You show data. And when that doesn't work, you have to get more supporters, and you have to escalate. There's something we as parents have that no one else has, and that's no profit, no other motivation. Nobody can buy us. We are here for our children, and you don't love anything in this world more than your children. And so just remember that. And we have a school board member who actually once said, every time a parent speaks about something, remember where their voice is coming from. It's for concern over their child. And that is so beautiful. And each child is only in kindergarten once, first grade once. So try to appeal to them with that parenting, that what it's like to be a parent, that feeling that you just can't really explain to anyone, because it is hard. And you know what? That's why all these groups are here working together. And that is why I literally teared up when the AFT and then NYSUT came out with these resolutions, because this is really emotional to me. Public schools are everything to me. I'm a product of one. I've taught in them for over 20 years, starting in New York City. And for the first time in my life, I thought, do I need to leave a public school? And I said, no, I'm not going to leave my public school. I'm going to support it because I believe it's a cornerstone of a community. And NYSUT and AFT coming out with this, they're helping us preserve public schools. And we need to know that this is actually in the best business for all of us. And I'm happy to support offline. I know it's incredibly hard, but most superintendents and administrators, if you go in with kindness, they will, come meet you. And I think the tides have changed dramatically even in the last few months. So please don't lose hope.
That's what we're here for, and that's why we put this together, is specifically to show our districts that there is a groundswell of support, and show the union of teachers that there is a groundswell report. So eventually we could get things changed on a state level.
And I'll just add, showing up to your Board of Ed meetings and taking some time to make public comment. I just recently had some success there with a few other parents. We just showed up and we all spoke for whatever the allotted time was. I think it was 3 minutes. And then the board and the faculty and the admin had a conversation about EdTech for the first time, I think, ever. So you never know. You might have board members who are having some of the same concerns. A lot of times they're parents too, and they just need someone to show up to the meeting and raise your hand and talk about why you're concerned. And they can use that as a jumping off point to talk to the superintendent or the administration. So, but yeah, to Jill's point, it's just about building support amongst your fellow parents and showing up, and keep sending them studies, keep sending them your concerns.
Jill and Caroline. And Jill, back to you on the same topic, just a follow-up question. You had mentioned bringing forth data when speaking, particularly to superintendents. So Brianne was asking what papers or reports you thought would be most powerful. Oh, and you answered. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I can share out some information, and also surveys are great, which you guys took care of.
Okay. Thank you. And then some more reflections and resources from Tally and Tim. So thanks to the whole community for stepping up and being together, especially to our wise and experienced and passionate parent advocates, professionals here. Jill, Caroline, Brett, Emily, for being here. We'll let you recede into the back of the spotlight. Lonnie, same thanks to you and to Melinda and leadership and the NYSUT community for all you're doing in partnership and in collaboration. And we'll have some parting words from Kathy, and lots of follow-up coming, including, again, the recording of today's conversation, the many resources that were shared, including each of these fantastic panelist groups that they are representing and leading, and we'll stay in conversation. So Kathy, back to you.
Well, we could have taken the entire day to hear more from our good friends at NYSUT and our panelists. I just want to thank the audience for taking time out of a beautiful summer day to be with us. This is only the beginning. We did this in the middle of the summer because we know that parents are grappling with these issues, complicated issues all over Westchester, and we don't want you to feel like you're by yourself and all alone on this. So, as I said, this is just the beginning, and we're going to be following up with a thank you email with a lot of information. It will have a link to today's recording and We urge you to send it out to everybody you know. There'll be a link to the NYSUT Unplugged conference. I'm already signed up to attend. A link to the Disconnect to Reconnect portion on the Westchester Library System website. You can join Disconnect to Reconnect if you're so inclined, but you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter, and we try to include information on studies and reports like this in those newsletters. We're going to send out a copy of the coalition recommendations. Consider that a dynamic document because we're learning more all the time and working with ever expanding group of partners on this issue. So the recommendations are, will continue to be shaped. And we are going to start planning a roundtable that will be co-sponsored with Senator Shelley Mayer, who chairs the Senate Education Committee. We're looking toward early October for that event. And I guess I'll just end by saying I learned so much today. I learn all the time from our panelists. And I really invite you all to join us and get involved. There's a lot to do. We could use help. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day.